In this video, we're going to go over 4 different methods for dividing polynomials. And the first one we've already done once, and this is simply the distributive property. Everything's being divided by a monomial. Anytime it's a monomial, you can always just split and divide everything by the 3x squared. So each term on top, we're going to write and divide by the bottom. So plus the last term is 3x squared divided by 3x squared. Then you use simple properties of your exponents. First term, 6 divided by 3 is a 2. There's 4 x's on top, 2 on bottom. Subtract them, you're left with 2 on top. Minus 15 divided by 3 is 5. 3 x's on top, 2 on bottom. Subtract them, you're left with 1. The last term, 3 divided by 3 is, and you have to put this 1 as a placeholder because your x's actually cancel completely, and you do have to put that plus 1 at the end. Number 2, the exact same thing. Take every term and divide it by 7ab, and then just use your rules of exponents. 21 divided by 7 is 3. 5a's on top, 1a on bottom, subtract, you're left with 4. 3b's on top, 1 on bottom, subtract, you're left with 2. Minus 14 divided by 7 is 2. 3a's and 1a leaves you with 2a's. 2b's and 1b leaves you with a single b. Plus 63 divided by 7 is 9. 2a's, 1a leaves you with a single a, and the b's cancel completely. Number 3, we can also use factoring. Now, this is going to be our best method. If you have a trinomial and a binomial, always try to factor and just see, will it divide this way? The top factors into 2 sets of parentheses. A w and a w adds, multiplies is a -2 and a -5. The bottom will not factor. It's already a single linear factor on bottom. And look what you've got. You've got a w minus 5 on top and bottom. A whole factor and a whole factor can actually cancel each other out, and you just divided. You're left with w minus 2. So that's another method of division. So let's use bottoms up here to factor this. Move the 4 to the end. H squared minus 7h minus 8, 2 sets of parentheses. H times h, -8, +1. We moved to 4, so now let's divide by it. That would be an h minus 2 and a 4h plus 1. 4h, I lost my h. And we're wanting to divide that by h minus 2. So in order to divide that by h minus 2, here's what you do. You mark them out. There's a common factor on top and bottom, and you can cancel the entire factor out, and you're left with just the 4h plus 1. Now, what if factoring is not possible? You have 2 other methods. You have long division and you have synthetic division. Now, I'm going to go through the process of long division, and I want to remind you as I go through this, the long division that I'm about to show you is identical to the long division that you used back in 4th grade. The steps that we did here, or that we're about to show here, are the same steps that we did here. 32 into 48. It won't go into 4, so we do 32 into 48. How many times will it go? And if you've never had the teacher tell you this, if that confuses you, well, don't worry about the 2 and the 8. Just look at the numbers out front and say, well, what about 3 and 4? How many times would that go? And that allows you to predict how many times 32 will go into 48. Once you figure out how many times it goes, you multiply. Then what do? You subtract. And you subtract and get 16. Now what do? I bring down the next number. And you go through the exact same process again. That'd be a 5, multiply, 160, subtract, bring down the 6, 32 into 56 goes once, 1 times 32 is 32, and then you had this last number which we called the remainder. And to begin with, you put a big R and you did like the 24, remainder 24. Then you had a teacher around maybe 4th or 5th grade tell you, you don't have to do that anymore. The remainder can actually be written over the number you're dividing by. So as we look at that, look what we could do now. We want to divide this by this. X plus 8 is what we're dividing by. We're going to divide it into x squared plus 3x minus 43. How do I do that? Don't worry about the whole x plus 8. Let's just worry about the x and the x squared. We're going to divide x plus 8 into x squared plus 3x first, the same way that we just divided 32 into 48. Now, how do you actually divide? If I say, what is 12 divided by 3? Do you know what you do in your mind? You don't actually take 12 dots and divide it into 3 groups. You ask yourself, well, what times 3 is equal to 12? Since 4 times 3 is 12, then 12 divided by 3 is 4. Do the same thing here. X squared divided by x. Well, x times what gives you x squared? x. Now what do? You take this value, this x, and you now multiply it by both of these, the same way you took the 1 and multiplied it by the 32 to give you the 32. X times x is x squared. X times 8 is 8x. What do you do now? You subtract. If you do this correctly, the first terms should always cancel, and you have 3x minus, you got to subtract it all, 8x, that's a negative 5x. A lot of people miss it there. This minus this. What do you do next? You bring down the negative 43 and you do it again. X into negative 5x. We'll go negative 5 because negative 5 times x is negative 5x. And you've got to multiply it by both. Negative 5 times 8 is a negative 40. Do the same thing. Subtract again. These should cancel. Negative 5x minus negative 5x. Then you have a negative 43 minus a negative 40. Now minus minus, that makes it a plus. Negative 43 plus 40 is a negative 3. You then take the remainder and you write it over what you divided by. So therefore this is x minus 5 minus 3 over x plus 8. Okay, we have another method of doing the exact same thing, and it's called synthetic division. Now let me go through with it, how the process of synthetic division works. You draw yourself a box. You're going to divide by x plus 8. Set that equal to 0 and solve it. Move the 8 over and it gives me negative 8. Whatever you get, whatever you're dividing by, you're going to put on the outside, just the number. Okay, not the whole x plus 8. Set it equal to 0, solve it. Whatever you get, you're going to put it on the outside of the box. You're then going to take your coefficients, 1, 3, and negative 43, and you're going to put it in the box. Space it out a little bit. And here's the process. Bring down the first number. Same way we brought down numbers over here, bring down the first number. When something gets below the line, we multiply by the negative 8. Negative 8 times 1 is a negative 8. Put it back in the box. This is a positive 3 and a negative 8. Combine them. A positive 3 minus 8 is a negative 5. Once something gets below the box, we multiply it by this number. Negative 8 times negative 5 is a positive 40. Now you have a negative 43 and a positive 40 in the box. Combine them. Negative 43 and a positive 40 is a negative 3. And I like to put a box around it. You might be thinking, well, what did I just do? Look at the answer from the previous problem, which was much longer than what we just did. And here's what you're going to do. What's in this box is your remainder. Then these values, you're going to count, it's hard to explain this, you're going to count up by your x's. The first number will be your constant term. The next number will be your x term. Then if you have more, it'll be x squared, x to the third, x to the fourth, and so on and so forth. So your remainder was a minus 3 over what you divided by. The next number is going to be your constant term. The next number is going to be your x term. So you get the exact same answer, much quicker way with synthetic division. Okay, number 7 says use long division or synthetic division to divide the polynomials below. I want to do a mixture of both. The first one, I'm actually going to do both methods again. You're dividing by n minus 7. You're dividing into 2n squared minus 16n plus 19. It's very important that we know both of these methods. N will go into 2n squared 2n times. Once you divide, you then take that 2n and multiply it by both. 2n times n is 2n squared. 2n times negative 7 is a negative 14n. Subtract. If you do it correctly, these will cancel. Negative 16 minus negative 14. Remember, minus minus will be plus, so negative 16 plus 14 will be a negative 2n. Bring down the 19. N will go into negative 2n, negative 2 times, because if you were to multiply negative 2 times the n, it gives you that negative 2n. Multiply by both, though. Negative 2 times negative 7 is a positive 14, and then you always subtract. These will always cancel. Leaves you with 19 minus 14, which is 5. So your remainder is 5, so we're going to do, your answer is 2n minus 2 plus your remainder over what you divided by, which was n minus 7. Long division. Synthetic division. Take this, set it equal to 0, and solve it. That number goes on the outside. So I go 7 on the outside, and I'm going to write my coefficients on the inside. 2, negative 16, and 19. The steps are this. Bring down the 2. Multiply it as soon as something gets below the line. Multiply it by the number on the outside. That's a positive 14, by the way. Negative 16 and a positive 14 is a negative 2. Multiply by the number on the outside gives you 14. Negative 14. Negative 19 minus 14 is a 5, and that is your remainder. This is your remainder. This is your constant term. This is your n to the first. If you had more, it'd be n to the second, n to the third, and you would just count up from there. So again, I said this was your n term. This is your constant term, so it has no n's. Plus, this is your remainder, so you're going to do your remainder over what you divided by. Same answer either way. We'll do this one with both methods as well, just to show you. Y minus 2 into y to the third plus 5y squared. I'll go a little bit faster with this one. Y into y to the third goes y squared times multiplied by both will be y to the third minus 2y squared. Subtract. Cancels. 5 minus negative 2 would be 5 plus 2, which is 7. Bring down the negative 7y. Y goes into 7y squared, 7y times, because when you multiply it, 7y times y is 7y squared. 7y times negative 2 is a negative 14y. Subtract. Always cancels. Negative 7 minus negative 14 minus a negative is plus, so that would give you a negative 7 plus 14, which is 7y. Bring down the 2. Y will go into 7y 7 times. You get 7y minus 14. When you subtract those, cancels, leaves you with 16 remainder. So your answer here is y squared plus 7y plus 7 plus the remainder over what you divided by. Synthetic division. Take what you're dividing by, set it equal to 0, and solve. You get 2. That number is going to go on the outside. You're dividing into 1, 5, negative 7, and 2. That's your coefficients. Here's your steps. Bring down the 1 gives you a 1. Multiply. 5 and 2 gives you 7. Multiply by the 2. Negative 7 and 14 gives you 7. Multiply by the 2. And it gives you a 16. Box it. That's your last number. That's your remainder. So you're going to take your remainder and write it over what you divided by, which was a y minus 2. Then you're going to count up. This is your constant term. This is going to be your y term, and this will be your y squared term. So 1y squared plus 7y's, and then that positive 7 here. Make sure you put your plus or minus signs. You get the exact same answer. Okay, number 9. Anytime that you're dealing with missing powers, notice you have k to the third and k to the first, but you don't have a k to the second. Anytime you're dealing with missing powers, and I'm not going to work this both ways, I'm just going to show you what you've got to do. If you're ever missing a power like, since it's jumped from third to first power, what you're going to have to do is in here, you're going to say, hey, I don't have any k squareds. You have to put that minus 0 k squareds or things won't line up whenever you're dividing these. Same thing works with synthetic division. K plus 5, set it equal to 0. You get negative 5. Negative 5 goes on the outside. 1k to the third, 0k squareds, negative 17k, and a positive 32. If you're missing a term, make sure you put a 0. Now let's work it. Bring down the 1. When something gets below, multiply it by this number. A 0 minus 5 is a negative 5. Once it gets below, multiply it by negative 5 gives you a positive 25. Negative 17 is 25 is a positive 8. Gives you a negative 40 when you multiply. Last number is a negative 8. That's your remainder. So this is your constant term, your k to the first, and your k to the second. So we have 1k to the second, negative 5k's, and your constant is a positive 8, minus, because your remainder is a negative, your remainder over what you divided by. Same answer either way. Next one we'll work with long division. X minus 8 goes on the outside. We're dividing into, and this might take a while, it's a long one. We have x to the fourth and x to the third, so 8x to the fourth minus 64x to the third. There is no x squared, so you do have to put 0x squared plus 3x minus 28. X goes into 8x to the fourth, 8x to the third times. Multiply it back out, gives you 8x to the fourth minus 64x to the third. When you subtract it, now this one's different. This cancels, and this one does too. Negative 64 minus negative 64 gives you 0x to the third. Now you do have to put that 0 there. Bring down your plus 0x squared. X goes into 0x to the third, 0x squared times. You do have to put it. 0x squared times x is 0x to the third. 0x squared times negative 8 is 0x squared. When you subtract, this cancels, but you need to put the second one. 0x squared minus 0 squared, let's put 0x squared. Bring down 3x. X goes into 0x squared 0x times. You must put it. 0x times 0x is 0x squared. 0x times negative 8 is negative 0x. Subtract. These cancel. Now we're back on track. 3 minus would be 3 plus, and that would be 3x. Bring down the negative 28. And finally, x goes into 3x 3 times. 3 times x minus 8 is 3x minus 24. And when you subtract those, negative 28 minus will be plus, leaves you with a negative 4. So your remainder will be negative 4 over what you're dividing by. Now we can clean this up a little bit because now we can take those zeros out. So your answer is 8x to the third plus 3 minus 4 over x minus 8.